Chapter 11 to 12. Darkness had walked off a moment ago to try and calm the two loudmouths Aqua and Kazuma, so I was left to my own thoughts as I waited for Luna and Ila. I didn't really want to join them right this moment since I would probably only get a headache from Aqua and Kazuma's arguing, so I headed over to a bench near the entrance of the guild and sat down. Now what should I do to pass the time? Not much to do really, I thought to myself as I leaned back into the bench and crossed my arms. Definitely should get some new books or something to read. Too bad things like Harry Potter, video games, or anime for that matter don't exist in this world. The word anime, after I thought it, gave me an idea. Now that I think about it, I haven't actually leveled up my gate in some time. Maybe I should look and see if there's anything new to unlock. I uncrossed my arms and extended my right hand slightly as a small gate opened. The gate dropped my adventurer card into my hand. After swiping to my skills tab, then pressing on the little extra tab for my gate, I started to look at my possible upgrades. I've gotten a bunch of the rate of fire and portal limits increased as well as the range. Let's see if any of the locked stuff from before is opened up. I swiped and searched for about a minute until I saw something interesting. The web of tabs and circles had a new tab, looks like a chain, but it has a spike or something on the end. I was certainly curious. I tapped the tab and a message popped up describing the skill. Enkidu, Chains of Heaven. My eyes widened slightly. A set of chains that was Gilgamesh's most valued treasure. These chains are stronger than your average set of chains, but they have the power to bind even gods. If the target has some sort of divinity or divine power, it becomes much harder for the target to escape. To say I was surprised was an understatement. I knew that some of the abilities that Gilgamesh had could be acquired, but I didn't think I could acquire weapons or equipment. Who knows what else I can get? I tried to find more unlocked tabs, but that was the only one I could see that was new and wasn't just a basic upgrade. With no reason not to pick it, I pressed on the tab and selected the acquire button. It took a very large amount of my skill points, but it was going to be worth it at some point for sure. I then opened up two gates to put these to the test. One gate had a normal chain made of steel and the other had the chains I had just acquired. I couldn't help but admire the chains. The actual chain part seemed relatively normal, if not for the fact that they looked even more pristine than the chains I already had. The difference being that the end of the chain had what seemed to be a spiked gold and black covered attachment. I went to touch the chain and upon my finger's touch, I had a slight pain in my head as my vision started to warp a bit. I closed my eyes and shook my head a bit. When my eyes opened, I wasn't in the guild anymore. I was now on some kind of temple that overlooked a massive ancient city that seemed so familiar. Is this Uruk? Looking around I noticed it was nighttime and people were still moving about as fires and candles lit up the streets and houses. Looking down at myself I saw that I was wearing a white toga of some sort and I could feel the wind on my skin as well as hear the sounds of the people. How am I here? Are the chains triggering some sort of reaction to this body? I continued to look out towards the city and beyond towards the mountains. My thoughts were broken by a voice behind me. Admiring your great city, are you? Turning my head to look behind me, I saw a young feminine-looking man with the same attire as me and long green hair with green eyes approaching me. I was about to say something to him, but before I could, my head started to hurt again. Once again I shook my head and blinked, but when I opened them I was back in the guild and my mood for some reason felt sad. I couldn't really explain what I was feeling or what just happened. Was that a memory? It felt so real. I thought as I felt the chain a bit. I can think about that later. I'm gonna test these out a bit. I wrapped both chains around my wrists and tugged with a good amount of force while having my gate force them to not budge. After about a second or two of slowly increasing force, the regular chain cracked and then snapped. The new chains didn't even budge and it felt like I could barely move it. I guess the divine blood in me is making it so I can't move or break them. I then dismissed the gate just in time to see Ila and Luna step out from the back room. Well, let's see if she did it. I got up from the bench and walked over. Luna was the first to speak. Say hello to our new waitress, she said with a big smile. I nodded towards her with a slight smile. Well, hello there, young miss. Ila slapped my shoulder lightly and chuckled. Thanks again for bringing me here. I waved my hand and put both hands in my pockets. Don't worry about it. Hopefully the other adventurers don't make it too bad. I'll make sure they stay in line when they get a little too drunk, spoke Luna as the two chuckled a little. I can get her a place set up, but we're going to have to spend the rest of the day training her up so you don't have to worry about a thing. Yeah, go do what you want, don't have to worry about little old me, Ila chimed in. I nodded. Well, good luck. Before turning, I'll be here for just a bit longer before I head out. Get something to eat. I waved to them as I walked to a table. I was still a little out of it, so I thought that maybe a quick bite to eat would be a good idea. Before I even knew it, I had sat down at the table that held Kazuma and his party. I sat next to Darkness, who was sitting next to Megumin, while Aqua and Kazuma were across the table. They seemed surprised that I just showed up and sat down with them, but Darkness spoke shortly after. Did your friend get the job? I nodded. Yes, she's being trained right now, so I thought I'd eat something before heading out. I looked over to Kazuma. You're going to see was right? Kazuma seemed surprised. Yeah, how'd you know? I pointed my thumb at Megumin and Darkness. While you were having your shouting match, they informed me. Oh, how do you know her? Kazuma asked. Before I left for my most recent quest, I saw the shop and decided to head in. Kazuma scoffed a bit. Least you met her on better terms. I raised an eyebrow while looking at the group. We bumped into her at the graveyard and she was helping some lost souls and stuff get to heaven. He then pointed to Aqua. Then this idiot tried to kill her because she's actually a lich. Aqua huffed and crossed her arms. She was doing a goddess job. Kazuma sighed. I talked her down and came to an agreement that Aqua would take over that job. Definitely a scenario I can imagine happening. I spoke in response to the story. I will be accompanying you to the shop as I would like to go there myself again. Yeah, sure, I got no problems with that, Kazuma responded. After he responded, a waitress came by and brought them the stuff that they ordered, so I placed my own order and had my gate procure a coffee. It was probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock, but I needed something to lift the webs that were in my head. It helped a little. They continued to chat amongst themselves, but I was absorbed in my own thoughts, staring blankly at the wall across from the group as I occasionally sipped on the coffee. It was very strange. I know I'm not actually Gilgamesh, but seeing that memory, or whatever that was, is just messing with my head. Almost feels like I woke up from a nap in an odd place and don't know where I am or what the heck is going on. I felt a poke at my side, so turned my head to my right and saw Darkness looking at me. You alright? You're starting off into space a bit. I nodded slowly as some food was put before me. My thoughts are taking me elsewhere. No need to trouble yourself. Did something happen on your quest? I rubbed my temple a bit, a few snags, but nothing major. Everything went according to the plan I laid out. Just have a slight headache. Aqua, hearing our conversation a bit, decided to ask a question. What kind of quest did you go on anyway? Yeah, you were gone for a while. Kazuma was also curious. I sighed. I was personally requested to marry someone in order to draw out an unsavory cousin who wasn't exactly a good person. I set up a plan with an official and managed to get him arrested at the wedding. They all seemed surprised at the wedding part, except for Darkness, since she already knew, but she had another question. Did you two duke it out in an epic battle, beating each other senseless? She asked with a little too much excitement. No, nothing like that. I then had a small smirk. Did scare the living daylights out of him though. Even interrogated a few of his friends, I guess you could call them. What kind of interrogation? Darkness asked, getting heated at the way I said the words. Well, one person tried to assassinate me at one point, so I used my thumb to break individual ribs until he gave me information, I began saying while Darkness was getting more heated. Aqua and Megumin were disturbed, but Kazuma was just looking at Darkness with a deadpan expression. Then during the wedding, I choked someone out and punched him in the ribs, easily breaking a few. I let him go, but not before scaring him. Darkness seemed to be almost over the edge when Kazuma piped up. You might want to ease up there. I looked at him. The masochist here is gonna lose it, probably imaging it's her. I would never, she shouted in embarrassment. Of course you wouldn't, he responded with the most deadpan expression. Their little argument actually managed to clear up some of the webs that were in my head and let out a chuckle as I patted Darkness on the head. It's of no issue. I leaned in a little close to her ear. If you need more stories, let me know. Her face lit up as if she ate the hottest pepper in the world. Finding this hilarious, I let out one of my patented laughs that filled the guild hall. The others at the table laughed and chuckled a bit at Darkness' expense. She did smile slightly though as she saw me laugh, probably since I mostly looked out of my funk. My laugh died down a bit and was reduced to chuckles before I stopped altogether. What other adventures have you all undertaken? We took the snow sprite quest that was up, Megumin responded. Didn't get to show off my awesome power though. Her cheeks puffed a bit. I raised an eyebrow. They're snow sprites, not monstrous yetis or anything. What did you expect? Darkness answered, we came across a winter shogun. I've heard of shoguns, but aren't they usually passive unless threatened? Kazuma spoke up. First of all, we were disturbing the area or something since we were capturing so many of the sprites and it made the shogun angry. Still should have been able to get past it without much difficulty, I responded. Well, we aren't OP like you, and this chick wanted to fight it. Kazuma pointed at Darkness, caused a whole heap of trouble and got me freaking killed. It literally cut my head off. Killed? He nodded. Did Aqua use a spell to bring you back or something? Kazuma groaned a bit. Unfortunately, almost got out of all this crap. don't know how much more mental stress I can take. I chuckled, we all have hard times sooner or later. And we'll overcome it as comrades, said Darkness with determination. Kazuma sighed before standing up, well, I'm gonna head over to Wiz's now, so if you're still coming with then let's go. I nodded and said my goodbyes to Darkness and Megumin. Not much happened on our way to the shop. Aqua and Kazuma chatted while I led the two. Aqua more or less was complaining with how cold it was. I was fine since I was wearing my leather jacket outfit and had some light protection to the cold, but I kept silent for the most part. Didn't have much to say since I wasn't around them often. Maybe I should hang around a bit more and go on a quest with them, I thought to myself. I haven't gone on a quest with someone since the last Death Night incident, and that was more akin to a raid. But I won't let a whole party get wiped out this time. With my thoughts ending on that grim note, well, we're here, started Kazuma. Now I'll only say this once. He pointed at Aqua, behave in there, he finished as I walked in the store while Aqua went on a rant about how she's not a bum and is a great goddess. One might compare her to Ishtar in some ways, I joked in my head with a slight smile. The bell that was above the shop's door rang as we entered. I noticed the figure of was behind the counter putting up something on a shelf. She turned and started speaking, oh welcome Dash. She then saw Aqua peeking out from behind Kazuma, who was behind me. She screamed out and started flailing her arms. Aqua blitzed over to Wiz and started shaking her by the collar. Why the hell does a lich have a freaking shop while I'm living in a stable? You tramp! She continued to shout profanities as Kazuma started to pull out his sheathed sword. I put my hand on his shoulder to stop him. I'll handle this, he nodded and put his sheathed sword back. I calmly walked over to Aqua and grabbed her by the back of her collar. In a moment of surprise she let go of Wiz, but soon started flailing around like a child trying to get to and strangle Wiz. I sighed while holding her. Must I teach you to respect someone, or am I going to have to throw you out the door? I said while turning her around so she looked me directly in the eyes. She gulped a little bit as she calmed down. Good, I nodded and set her down behind me as she pouted and sat at a small table by the window. Kazuma exhaled loudly and looked at Wiz. Sorry about her. Oh, it's alright, she waved off with a strained smile. Kazuma sat in front of Aqua at the table. I turned to look at Wiz. Long time no see, I said with a slight wave. I made my way over to the table as well. Wiz still seemed a little stunned but noticed that there was only 2 chairs. I'll go get you another chair. She was about to rush off but I raised my hand to stop her. No need, I said while a golden portal opened in front of the table. A nice cushioned chair that looked incredibly crafted and comfortable appeared as I sat down on it between Kazuma and Aqua. Wiz quickly came out from behind the counter and stood slightly behind and beside me so I didn't have to turn my head much. I crossed my right leg over my left and hooked one arm behind the chair and relaxed a bit as Aqua mumbled and pouted. You gonna make some tea for us or something? She mumbled out rather rudely. Wiz then bowed and apologized. Sorry, I'll go make some right away. Before she went behind the counter, I reached out and lightly grabbed her arm. There will be no need for that. I started as Aqua pouted in my direction. We are guests and one of us acted rather rudely. I glanced at Aqua before looking back. I will serve tea. I waved my hand and 3 portals were opened, one in front of Kazuma, Aqua and I. 3 fine tea cups appeared in front of us, steaming and with a pleasant scent that filled the room. I looked to Wiz. Would you like one? She shook her head and bowed. No thank you, I nodded. Aqua slowly raised the tea to her lips and after a small sip her eyes widened slightly and she mumbled out, delicious. Kazuma sighed for the umpteenth time that day as he brought the tea to his lips. He then smiled as he placed the cup down. So Wiz, I got a favor to ask. Sure, what is it? She said with a tilt of her head. I had some spare skill points and I was hoping you could teach me a skill. Aqua almost choked on her tea as she did a spit take on Kazuma. Why would you want to learn a skill from her? She's a lich. She stood up and hooked her arm around Wiz. You know, the kind of things that like to live in musty old dungeons like a slug. Hey, that's rude. Wiz whined as Aqua let her go. There's no way a servant of a goddess is going to learn a skill from her. Kazuma slammed his hands on the table and stood up. I am not your servant. What was I doing right now? I was calmly observing while sipping my tea. My god, I may have to rethink the idea of joining them for a bit. Wiz then pointed something out. Wait, did she say she's a goddess? Aqua smiled smugly. Of course I did. I am the great goddess of water, Aqua Dash. She was cut off as a small golden portal opened above her and a small hammer fell out and bonked her on the head before disappearing. Wiz backed up in fear, so I stood up and patted her on the shoulder. Don't worry about it, I'll make sure she doesn't try anything. She shook her head. That's not it, Wiz started as she looked at me. If she is truly Aqua and is worshipped by the crazy Axis cult, then she must be more crazy and insane than them if she's the one they worship. A grin slowly formed on my face as I looked at Aqua, who had a bump on her head and tears started to form in her eyes as she looked at Wiz in embarrassment. I let out a small chuckle before and tried to contain it as Aqua was about to cry. By the gods, I can just imagine Ishtar right now. My chuckles began to get harder and harder to contain as I started to hold my sides a bit. Not long after that, the shop was filled with one of the loudest laughs I had ever done. I started as Aqua seemed to be on the verge of having a breakdown. That is a burn if I ever heard one. Ha 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 ha. With that, Aqua snapped and lunged at Wiz and grabbed her by a strap on her chest. You rat. Take that back. How dare you? With my laughing and Aqua's antics, poor Kazuma seemed to be just about done with all this. This time Kazuma took the initiative and bonked Aqua on the head in order to get her to release Wiz. We are getting absolutely nowhere. He tried to calm himself down a bit. Just go look around the shop so I can get my business concluded. Aqua was incredibly reluctant to let the insults go, but a hard stare from Kazuma got her to concede and she made her way to look around the shop. My laugh died down to chuckles. Well, that was certainly a good one. Kazuma looked at me. You laugh way too damn loud. You argue too damn loud, I responded with some sass. Good point, he conceded. Wiz straightened out her outfit before bowing once again and muttering another thank you, which Kazuma just waved off. When she straightened up and saw that Aqua was a good distance away, she looked to the both of us. Oh, by the way, she started, I heard that a few weeks ago you guys beat Verdia. He was incredibly skilled, even among the generals. His swordsmanship was second to none. Something in her wording put me off slightly. He was an incredibly tough opponent. I started, took everything I had and more to stand up to him. While I didn't land the final blow, I can surely respect his skill. But, I said, narrowing my eyes a bit, you speak as if you knew him personally. Putting my hands in my pockets, I shifted slightly. She couldn't be, but my gut isn't usually wrong. Kazuma nodded but didn't seem bothered. Yeah, do undead all know each other and stuff? She seemed a little embarrassed and noticed my slight shift. Well, you see, I'm actually one of the Demon King's generals myself. Right as the words left her mouth, a gate opened in front of her throat and a sword appeared from within faster than anyone in the room could blink. Aqua looked ready to pounce, but the speed at which the sword appeared stunned her momentarily. You mean to tell me, one of the Demon King's generals stands before me? I spoke with a slight edge as the sword let off a light wisp of radiant energy. Not my strongest blessed weapon, but we'll see if she's truly a threat. Wiz gulped audibly. Wait, please don't kill me. Just let me explain. Aqua shouted from behind her, come on, run her through. Kazuma put up his hands. Whoa, easy there, let's hear her out first. I glanced at him, then back to Wiz. Speak. She frantically spoke. I only maintain the magic barrier that surrounds his castle. I've never even hurt anyone and I can't even be considered a general. I'm such a small threat that I don't even have a bounty on me, she all but cried out. Aqua, Kazuma, and I glanced at each other before we all sighed, and I dismissed the sword and the gate. I shall place my trust in you for now. She immediately started to bow again. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I rubbed my temple. How strong is this barrier you maintain? Strong enough that no adventurer could break through it, even if you take out all of his generals, she said quietly. Is your life the only thing that keeps the barrier up? I asked and she nodded. Well, what stops us from killing her now? Aqua said while cracking her knuckles. No, please don't kill me yet. Her mood turned somber. I love this shop and there's still so much I need to do. Now that I think about it, it probably isn't a good idea to kill her and assault him, wherever he may be. I could probably fight a good portion of his army, but the generals are wild cards, and if they're even stronger than Verdia or on the same level, then it would be incredibly difficult to fight the Demon King himself. I tuned out the room as I glanced at Kazuma, too into my own thoughts to really hear them, especially if I go alone. I glanced at Aqua as well. While she is a goddess and could do some serious damage and probably keep us alive, there isn't much anyone can do, other than me and possibly a few other people around the world. As much as it pains me to say that, I tuned back into the conversation. It's the least I can do for what you did for me at the cemetery. Wiz spoke but straightened herself up as if remembering something. Oh wait. She scratched the back of her head. If I'm to teach you a skill, I need an opponent in order to show you. What kind of skill? I spoke, gaining her attention. The spell Drain Touch. It takes the mana of a creature and it can be transferred to another person or the user of the spell. She tilted her head. Do you want to learn a skill too? Do I? I thought for a moment. I almost never use my spells unless it's for mundane tasks like starting a fire, but really the only thing I need is a transportation spell. Do you know any transportation spells? She thought for a moment. I know teleport. How does it work? I asked even though I already knew. I mean I probably know what its limitations are, but this is a different world after all, so it could be different. It's a somewhat hard spell to fully master, but you can teleport to any location you're completely familiar with. She started as she held up a finger, but if you're not familiar with the area then it can be a little inaccurate, and if you've never been there then it just straight won't work. She sighed. Only drawback is that it takes a decent amount of magic and some spells can block teleportation within a certain area. She finished. I nodded. Yup, pretty much what I was thinking. If you are willing to teach it to me then I would be willing to learn. I have an abundance of magic and I should have enough skill points right now to learn it. She clapped her hands and smiled. Great, then let's get to it. First I'll teach Kazuma Drain Touch and then I'll teach you Teleport. So you need an opponent? Asked Kazuma. She nodded. I have to show you how it works in order for you to learn it. Kazuma nodded and looked at me. I hate to ask, but can you be the opponent? I don't trust Aqua to actually let Wiz do anything, and you got lots of magic. I shrugged. Doesn't bother me. Maybe I can pick up the skill if I have spare points after. I turned to Wiz. What do you need me to do? I just need your hand, she said as I took my left hand out of my pocket and offered it to her. She took my hand in her right hand and placed the left on top. I won't take much, but you might feel a bit drowsy. I don't think that'll be a problem though. Her hand let out a soft purple glow as I felt a pulling sensation on the top of my hand. Kind of feels like my hand is half asleep. It was a hard feeling to describe, that's for sure. It didn't hurt or make me feel uncomfortable, just a little odd. After a few seconds her face twitched for a second. Are you alright? She stopped the spell and waved her hands. I'm fine. She put her hands down. I guess since you have some sort of divinity, it kind of hurts to extract your magic. Makes sense. Kazuma then pulled out his adventurer card and tapped a few things on it. Well, here goes nothing. He tapped his card again and he glowed a green light as the familiar feeling, at least to me, and after a few moments it died down. Man, I can't wait to try this out. It can really help with our party's lack of firepower. I chuckled. I guess your only member that can do heavy damage is a one-trick pony with literally one trick and they're done. Kazuma slumped and then rose back up. Well, maybe this way I can give her more magic to do more spells or take it for myself and learn an attack spell or two. Before another word could be spoken the shop's doors burst open. Lady Wiz. Sorry to barge in, but I need your help, a raised voice spoke. We all turned our attention to the doors and saw an older man wearing a slightly fancy outfit, long gray hair, a goatee, and a hat which he held in his hand. Wiz tilted her head. What do you need? The man noticed us and gave a light bow. Sorry to interrupt your business. He turned back to Wiz. That property I told you about is still haunted. I looked at the man. Haunted? He nodded. I've had many priests and exorcists come through, but every time the place gets cleared, the spirits just keep coming back. Oh my, that is odd, Wiz spoke. Could you please take care of it? The man asked. Wiz glanced at Aqua who was giving her a glare. I think they can. She pointed to us three. Really? Said the man. Aqua then put her hand to her chest and started to chuckle. Of course we can, for you see, I am the greatest ghost-clearing archpriest goddess there ever was and ever will be. Aqua. The man's sweat dropped as Aqua struck some kind of pose. He looked to Wiz. She truly is a gifted archpriest, she spoke in response to his stare. I can vouch for her from personal experience, she said the last part with a slight hint of trepidation. The man passed his gaze over us again. Are you all adventurers? We nodded. If Wiz vouches for you then you must be the real deal. He bowed again slightly. I'm the landlord of a mansion on the edge of the residential area and the place has been recently plagued with an increasing number of spirits. Rising up he looked us in the eye. I'll pay you and even let you live in the place rent-free if you can just get rid of the spirits once and for all. Now that is an incredibly generous reward to just cleanse a place of spirits. Either he is just that nice or he is truly desperate. I looked to Kazuma and Aqua. What do you two think? Kazuma, knowing that this could actually work out since Aqua is a literal goddess who can help spirits pass on, he immediately nodded. We'll do it. We can gather our party and be there tonight. The man's face brightened. You will? Thank you. He shook Kazuma's hand with enthusiasm. I will forever be in your debt. He ended the handshake and gave Kazuma a slip of paper. These are the directions. There is a formal quest at the guild, so if you do successfully complete this quest then you can collect the money there. The man then left the building and it looked like a massive weight was taken off his shoulders. You certainly have an interesting quest on your hands, I chuckled. A whole mansion as a reward to boot. Kazuma pumped his fist. Ah, hell yeah. This is one quest we can actually do. Kazuma looked to Aqua. All of our homelessness problems can be solved. Aqua pumped her fist as well. Yeah. This quest will be a walk in the park for someone like me. No more sleeping in the stables for me. The two began cheering and were getting more excited as the seconds passed. chanting things like, free house, and, ticket to the good life. The quest certainly seems interesting, I thought to myself as me and was just watched them. I looked to Wiz, why did this man come to you? She scratched the back of her head, usually whenever people have ghost troubles, they come to me. I nodded in understanding, I had heard from Kazuma you were sending off spirits when you met. She chuckled a bit, Aqua almost sent me off with them. So I've heard. Do you still want to learn teleport? She tilted her head. If you're still willing to teach. I think those two are still a bit busy so I can show you real quick. She walked off to behind her counter and opened the door to the back room. I watched her as she entered the room's doorway, then turned to stare at me. She smiled slightly and waved at me before she flashed and vanished. I already felt the presence behind me, so I didn't jump when she grabbed my shoulders from behind and said, boo. Not even paying attention to the fact that she tried to scare me, I turned around towards her. I assume there isn't a limit to range. She seemed down as I ignored her attempt. No, there isn't, but the more distance means more magic. Also, large objects take up a lot as well. I nodded. Now to show you transporting people. She put her hand on my shoulder and we were suddenly inside her storage room. Impressive, I said as we were inside the storage room. I would also assume that multiple uses in short spaces wouldn't be effective. She nodded. Yeah, teleporting multiple times in a room is a waste of magic, and there's also a chance you won't end up in the proper spot. The blink spell is more suited for close range stuff. Understandable, I said while opening my gate above one of my hands and conjuring my adventurer card. After pressing the required tabs and finding the teleport spell, I acquired the skill and used up another fair amount of skill points, the chains, and this really took almost all of my points. I lit up a bright gold as the knowledge of the spell went into my mind. Looks like I can probably teleport at least 5 to 10 times before it would start to get tiring. Not many places other than home and the guild that I would go to. Satisfied with the new spell, I dismissed my card and looked at Wiz. Is there anything I owe you? Kazuma stopped Aqua from killing you, but I haven't done anything to warrant this charity. She raised her hands and waved them fast while sweating a bit, or at least the equivalent of an undead being embarrassed. Why, you didn't kill me when you had the chance, so that's enough for me. Are you sure? I walked a little closer. Money isn't an issue if you need compensation. For one to teach such an advanced spell for free is a little odd. She backed up with her hands still raised, and no, really it's fine. She continued to back up, but her foot caught on a bottle and she let out a yelp as she fell backwards. Quickly reacting, I put my arm behind her back and stopped her from falling on the floor. She seemed surprised I caught her. You should clean this room up a bit and watch your step, I chuckled. She continued to stare at me for a moment before we were interrupted. Hey, you guys alright in here? We were just about to leave. The voice of Kazuma was cut short and he entered the storage room staring at the two of us. He continued to stare for a few seconds before he almost slid out, kind of smooth like a moonwalk or a sliding picture. This isn't what it looks like. Wiz shouted in embarrassment before I set her straight. Well, I best be on my way then. I laughed a little. I may return soon. Just before I left the room I turned back. Thank you again for the teleport spell, I said as I left her in the room blushing. After Kazuma, Aqua and I left the shop, we went looking for the rest of their party. Took us a while to find them since we had to go to all the places they usually frequented to find them. Once we did find them and told them about the quest, they went off to collect their things and met us at the guild when they were ready. We didn't stay at the guild long since we had a quest to do, so we left almost right away after everyone got there. I took the lead since I knew the residential area a bit more than they did, considering Megumin just lived at an inn and apparently Darkness only rented a place because her home was outside of town. I wasn't contributing to the conversations they were having and was more focused on finding the place. We were currently on a path just outside the residential area and were in a relatively open area as we walked. It wasn't until we were about 5 minutes away that someone actually spoke to me since we started traveling to the mansion. Hey Gil, asked Kazuma. I leaned and turned my head a bit since I was in front of the group. Yeah. Not that I mind you coming with us, but why did you come? I shrugged. I've been going solo for months and haven't been on a quest with someone else since that raid many months ago that me and Darkness went on. So I thought I might as well join you guys on a few missions as a refresher. Well, there's no way in hell I could turn you down since you're literally the strongest guy I know. Way stronger than that Mitsurugi guy who has a cheat sword. I chuckled at that. Kind of makes me wonder what you were like when you first got here. Kazuma turned to Darkness. You knew him from before you met us, right? She nodded. We first met when he was required to form a party to clear a dungeon. I scoffed and looked back ahead. The guild didn't trust me enough at the time, so I placed up a party formation request and she was the only one to approach me. Kazuma's eyes widened slightly. Really? You must have been relatively strong by then still, so how were you not approached by anyone else? I shrugged, must have been too intimidating. No wonder she approached you then. He got a hey in response to that from a certain masochist. You're somewhat nice and the guild didn't seem to hate you when I got here, so why did they avoid you? After a quick chuckle I responded, back then I was in my armor almost all the time and never interacted with anyone really and was mostly by myself. I don't wear my armor nearly as often anymore. I for one think that the change was good, Darkness said, although your armor is pretty magnificent. It indeed is, I agreed, the place should be right over here. I looked to my right and saw a brick path that led to the mansion. Directly in front of us was a gate and a small stone wall that went all the way around the property. The mansion itself had a green roof and stone architecture that gave it a very nice look. From outside I could see a fairly large balcony that could easily fit dozens of people and windows all around the place. Aqua put her hands on her hip as the gate opened. This place will certainly do for a goddess of my caliber. Megumin looked at the place and looked down a bit. It's big, I heard some aristocrat used to live here. Darkness responded, certainly was nice that the landlord said we could live here. She glanced at me, are you going to take a room as well? I thought it over for a moment. I might lay claim to a room so if I'm ever here I can sleep here, but I do have my own place already. She nodded at my response. Well, the spirits still need to be cleared, Kazuma said. Even after multiple exorcists came through, the place is still haunted. Well, I'm a goddess and an archpriest. Aqua started striking poses. I'm an all-around anti-undead expert. She then stuck her hands out and they glowed orange. I see it clearly now. The spirit was a girl who was the daughter of an affair. To avoid a scandal she was dash. We all just kind of stared at her as she kept going. I'm gonna go in, I said while walking away from Aqua. Yeah, I think we'll come with, Megumin said lowly. We slowly made our way to the front doors, which I opened. The interior was what you'd more or less expect from an old-timey mansion. The front was open and had doors spaced out with a staircase leading upstairs and a few pathways behind the staircase leading somewhere. I only said one thing, nice but dirty. The place was pretty dusty and had a light musty smell since it hadn't been cleaned since all these spirits had arrived. It certainly needs a good cleaning, said Darkness as she swiped a random spot with her finger and a layer of dust came off. If Aqua really can clear this place of spirits, then we probably should clean up. She glanced around again. There probably is some cleaning supplies around here somewhere. Might take us some time to find some. With a slight sigh, I waved my hand and a large gate opened in front of us. I have a few things to use for now. A few cleaning supplies ranging from dusters to water buckets with mops, pails and even some soap for the mops. Is there anything you don't have? Kazuma asked. I looked at him, don't have a weapon capable of bending the fabric of reality and destroy the surface of the earth. Yet, they all asked. Ignoring their questioning stares, let's get cleaning. I don't like cleaning that much, so let's get it done while we have energy. Where should we even start? Asked Megumin as she grabbed a bucket and a cloth. Darkness was first to respond. I for one would like to pick a room first and clean that way I can have a place to rest and not have to worry. Sounds like a good idea, I said. Kazuma and Megumin, you take the right side of the upstairs and me and Darkness will take the left side. We can cover more ground that way and I'm pretty sure the bedrooms are upstairs. Sounds good to me, Kazuma responded as he grabbed some of the supplies and led Megumin up the stairs. We'll holler if we find anything useful or come across any spirits, and with that they disappeared down a hallway up the stairs. Darkness and I picked up a few things and headed up the stairs. It's been a while since it was just you and me, she said. Maybe this time we won't come across a death knight. That would be the best thing to come across. I could use an exhilarating battle right now, she said with a flushed face as we turned down the halls. Don't you always want an exhilarating battle? Who doesn't? Most sane people. She puffed her cheeks out, which made me chuckle. I do like a good battle from time to time, and it's been a while since I've had a tough one now that I think about it. Then after this we should look for a difficult quest, she said with a little too much enthusiasm. I was about to nod and agree, but suddenly my vision warped a bit. Oh great, what now? I thought as I was suddenly in a dark void. Multiple images flashed before me, but I couldn't really make anything out. Is this another vision? Is something bad going to happen? The images slowed down a bit and one thing finally stood out as a word popped into my head, the word fortress. A large spider-like stone structure quickly flashed before I found myself back in reality. I was still walking forward, guess I was only out for a second. I quickly realized I didn't respond to Darkness. I'll have to hold you to that then. Great, she nodded excitedly. She then looked at a random room on her left and went to open it. I watched her open the door to what seemed like a bedroom. Oh wow, she said when she opened it. The room was fairly large and was bigger than the one I had at home. There was a small green area rug in the middle of the room that took up about 3/4 of the room, a large queen-sized bed with red sheets and a basic but nice frame was on one side of the room with 2 dressers and a bedside table, a closet on the other side of the room that looked to be about 2 times the size of mine. And there was a window that looked into the backyard of the house with a desk next to the window. While she looked at the room from the door, I turned around and walked across the spacious hall to the door on the other side and opened it. The room looked practically identical to the one Darkness just looked at. I looked back to her. Well, I guess I'll take this one and you take that one. You want to be across from me? She asked with a light blush. Is there an issue with that? We've slept in the same room before back when we cleared that abandoned castle. She shook her head and her face cleared up. I guess you're right. She headed into the room and put down the supplies she was carrying, then started to dust the room, which I started to do as well. It took about an hour to clean the respective rooms. They had to be mopped, dusted, and the sheets be cleaned. I kind of cheated with the sheets and put them in my gate to be cleaned and perfected, so that saved a lot of time. I did the same for Darkness, which she was thankful for. I finished cleaning my room first, so I helped her finish up. We were currently in her room, with me sitting on the chair by the desk and her sitting on the bed. I had changed my attire when I started cleaning, so I was now wearing a long-sleeve white shirt, loose black pants, and the usual shoes I wore. Essentially a copy of the clothes I usually slept in, just so I was a bit more comfortable as I cleaned. We were taking a quick rest since we were cleaning for about an hour. We more or less sat in silence for a few minutes before I spoke. Should probably go find Kazuma and see if they picked a room or found something. She nodded as we both stood up. Maybe a living area where we can all hang out would be nice. I looked out the window and the sun seemed like it was going to start setting soon. We probably have another hour or two before sunset. I'm only cleaning one more room before I'm done. I can agree with that, she said while heading to the door. We didn't really talk as we left the room since there wasn't much to say other than comment on some of the decor and whatnot. We did dust on our way down the hall so it'd be less work later, and it gave us something to do before we met up with Kazuma and Megumin. When we made it into the hall that Kazuma and Megumin went down, we could see that they took some time to clean the hallway, but it looked a little rushed, which was more or less understandable given the current time and all that. We roamed the halls for a few more minutes and heard the sounds of people speaking. I'll start on the windows and you get to the furniture, we heard the voice of Kazuma. Should we go get Darkness and Gilgamesh so they can help with this one? Responded Megumin. No need, I spoke as I rounded the corner and into the room. The room we now found ourselves in seemed to be a rec room or an entertainment room of some sort. There was a table on one side of the room, a couch in front of a fireplace, multiple windows that faced the front entrance, and even a set of glass doors on the other side of the room that went onto the balcony outside. Awesome timing, Kazuma said as he wiped some sweat from his face. He was in more casual wear as well. He took off his green mantle thing he usually wore and was in a more casual shirt that was white with gray shoulders and pants. Just found this room and thought that we could use it as a chill spot. Darkness spoke up. We just finished picking and cleaning out our rooms. What about you guys? We did the same, Megumin responded. She had also forgone her hat, cloak, and eye patch. With you guys here we can do this room quick and relax. Without another word I summoned a broom into my hand with my gate. Let's finish this room, and then we can wait out the spirits. They all nodded and we got to work. I was sweeping the place and cleaning the floor and sweeping the balcony. Megumin was wiping down all the furniture and tables. Kazuma was cleaning the windows and Darkness was helping where she could, but she mostly helped out Kazuma by the windows. Took us about a half hour to clean the room since we were all working together, so it went by quick. Kazuma stood up from his position on the floor. He dropped the rag he was just wringing onto the edge of a bucket. He stretched and let out a loud sigh. Ah, finally we're done. Done for today, I reminded him. Well, at least we got our stuff unpacked and rooms cleaned, Darkness sighed as she wrung out a rag. With a wave of my hand, all the supplies that I conjured were sent back to my gate. Indeed, I for one would like some fresh air. Kazuma then made his way to a window. Well, let's get one of those things done. He then opened a set of the windows. Only to immediately let his mood go from happy to confused yet frustrated. Oh my god, she's still going. I walked over next to him and looked out the window, only to see Aqua with the same glow on her hands as she continued to list off all the things that a supposed little girl liked. Is she still reading Just One Spirit? Kazuma faced blank before he shut the window and turned around. Well, I think I'm done for today, so I'm gonna hit the sack, he said with a somewhat forced smile. You're not going to look around more? Megumin asked. Nah, I'm just gonna go and get ready for bed, he said while making his way out of the room. Night, he said as he disappeared into the hallway. I looked to the other two. What about you two? Megumin stretched. I think I agree with Kazuma, I'm tired too. I'm going to need energy if I'm to go on my daily explosion route. Well, good night then, Darkness said as Megumin left the room. Darkness looked to me, I might do the same. Well, our rooms are right across from each other, so I'll follow you out. I noticed that after I said the words, follow you out, she looked like she was gonna say something indecent. No, I will not be doing what you're thinking. You're not going to follow me then, take advantage of my tired state and have your way with me. I just stared blankly at her and made to leave the room. I heard he mutter as I was leaving the room. The cold stare. Wait up, she said the last part aloud as she snapped from a trance and jogged up to me. Not wanting to go on with the previous conversation, I looked to Darkness. What did Megumin by explosion route? Well, you know how she's obsessed with explosions, she said. I blanked my face a bit. Never knew, I said sarcastically. She usually goes with Kazuma pretty routinely to blow stuff up. I tilted my head questioningly. She's literally only able to cast it once, right? Yes, it is very powerful though. Her face reddened. To be hit by it is truly something else. I just let out a small hum in response. Maybe it would be worth adding some skill points into a class that can use explosion magic. I'm not an arch wizard, but I could probably learn some lower tier explosion spells to boost the power of my arsenal. Though it does consume a large amount of magic. But then again, Megumin has low magic reserves and only casts the highest tier of the spell, so I don't have much to go on. Well, food for thought and something to look into when I had time and more levels. Considering I spent almost all my points today on 2 skills. After those thoughts, we had arrived at our rooms. Well then, I started while rotating my shoulders and neck a bit. I bid you a good night. Good night to you as well, she responded as we both entered our respective rooms. Once the door to my room closed, I let out a sigh and flashed my shirt and shoes off while heading to the bed. While it was cool outside, the sheets on the bed were rather thick and I was used to colder climates anyway. I slipped under the covers and put my arms behind my head. It's been nice being able to interact with other people. Still weird since I've been on my own for a while, other than a few people recently. I stared at the ceiling before I slowly started to drift off to sleep. I don't know how long it took me to fall asleep, or how long I have been asleep. But at some point I found myself in a familiar location. I'm here again, aren't I? I thought to myself as I felt the familiar toga on me, the wind and sights of Uruk below me. I don't know how long I just stared into the distance. It felt like hours of just staring blankly ahead. Strangely peaceful. What is this supposed to mean? It didn't make sense. Why am I having these visions now? Or are they dreams? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Did unlocking a precious treasure awaken something? Or was I just overreacting? I must be going crazy, I chuckled as I shook my head. That is possible. I slowly turned my head as I heard a voice behind me, but crazy is seen different ways by other people. With the familiar long green-haired man approaching me, I let out a chuckle. I've talked to people in my dreams before, but this doesn't feel like one. It technically is one, Enkidu said as he stood beside me. He shrugged. Could be a mental projection, or your subconscious somehow created me for something you don't understand yet. The subconscious is always something that can never truly be understood. Figured that out in my past life, I responded as we stared outwards. I looked towards him. If you truly are real, then obviously you know that I'm not him. Enkidu shrugged. I could say the same. He chuckled. I may be real, but I may not be. All that I know is that you're here and I'm here now. He turned to meet my gaze. Haven't truly had a close friend since you arrived, other than the weird blonde woman with a interesting taste. I smirked. I've always been the quiet one, I've always been the loner, and I've always been somewhat of an outcast. The smirk lowered a bit, but completely changing who I was in less than a year has been, not hard but different. I nodded. When I touched your chains I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. I looked back out to the city. While I still can't understand it, whether it be my true emotions or this body's, I felt genuinely homesick, for the lack of a better term. Almost lonely. I paused momentarily. When I first arrived I was beyond ecstatic. I had powers and I was on my path to achieving every nerd's dream. My mindset changed and even my actions. Been doing things I rarely did and things I never did. I've even been thinking differently. More brash, dignified, and even arrogant. This brought a chuckle out of the man next to me. Maybe it's just the clash of this body, my old mindset and way of life. Or I could be trying to make this my normal life subconsciously, and that's what probably brought you here. I finished with a heavy sigh. Guess you forgot to mention you think more and are smarter than you old true self. This got me to chuckle. You're not him and I'm not truly me. But what I do know is that you're doing what you can and want to do, which is more than what most people can say. He put a hand on my shoulder. Your old life is gone and you've started a new one in a whole new world. He pondered for a moment before smirking, still as much of a worrywart as him though. Enkidu finished as he removed his hand. This got me to laugh a little. I guess you're right. I straightened up my posture. A man of my capabilities and personality shouldn't fret on these things. The past is behind me, I said with a somewhat cocky tone which caused my companion to chuckle. Now you're starting to sound more like him. But you don't have to change yourself either. Find the proper balance and go with what you feel is right in the moment, he smirked. Lest your so-called Gilatuti as you dubbed it takes over. Don't remind me of that name, I grimaced. We both shared a laugh and looked back towards the city. Not long after our laugh died down, Enkidu spoke once more. I think it's about time I leave, he said while turning around, slowly fading away as he did. Certainly is an interesting dream, isn't it? Talking to a long dead, partially fictional, person and speaking as if we're both someone else. I nodded as I turned. Truly a weird dream, I smiled at the end as he fully disappeared. Looking back once more towards the city, I said aloud, always did have weird ones. My eyes didn't shoot open but they opened and I was greeted by the ceiling of the room I was in. I slowly sat up in the bed and looked out the window. Nighttime, eh? Can't have been asleep too long then. Not long after glancing at the window, something felt off, like I was being watched. I pushed out my senses and felt some sort of presence in the room. Was it a spirit? Glancing around the room, I saw something on the desk at the other side of the room. A doll? I mumbled aloud. I uncovered myself and walked towards the doll. The eyes didn't move but I felt like they were watching me. ***, you must be a spirit of some kind, I said lowly as I bent down a bit and went to pick it up. Suddenly it started to float and tried to fly at me, but it was just a doll so I caught it with ease as I looked in its emotionless eyes. Have to do better than that. Right after I spoke those words, the closet door that was nearby flew open and at least 30 to 50 dolls swarmed out. Better, I said with a smirk as they swarmed me, but not the best, I smirked as they fully surrounded me. Time to use a skill I have literally not used once since I acquired it. I started to radiate a gold aura, radiant soul, I mumbled as the aura briefly expanded outwards and lit up the whole room. The effect was almost instantaneous. The dolls stopped and slowly dropped one by one as the divine aura washed over them. Little wisps of what looked like smoke came off of them as they fell. It was probably their souls as they were released. I looked around at the dolls that were on the floor. Don't know if that exorcised them or not, but we'll have to go with that for now. There were then multiple large thuds from outside the room and muffled shout, probably in darkness room too. I dashed out the room and into darkness. From what I could see, there was a pile of dolls on the floor that were all moving around trying to hold something down. Radiant soul, I said aloud as a wave of radiant aura washed over the dolls. Like a puppet that got its strings cut, they all went limp and rolled away, revealing darkness under them. She was wearing a pink nightgown with her let down and sprawled on the floor. She was breathing incredibly heavy with a flushed face as she turned her head to me. Why did you stop them? It was just starting to get good. I looked at her with a deadpan stare. Don't look at me with such eyes. She then realized something, or better yet keep staring. Those eyes that would do anything to a weakened maiden on the cold hard ground in the middle of the night. I continued to stare for a moment before turning around and leaving without a word. Wait, she said while getting up, where are you going? I stopped at the door and turned my head, to go exorcise some spirits. Wait for me, she said while jogging up to me, I'll go with you. I shrugged, suit yourself. I continued to walk out the room. Where do we even start? She said as she joined me in the hallway. I looked both ways before pushing out my senses. That way, I said pointing to my right and heading that way. Darkness was on my left, you think so? I know so, I smirked, call it a divine intuition if you will. You can sense spirits? I nodded, since when? For a long time, I responded as we turned down another hall. I use it a fair amount but still not the most often. She nodded slowly. Do you know how many there are? I shook my head. Not exactly. I get a sense of where a divine spirit, a dark creature or a spirit is, but not a pinpoint location, I said as we approached another hallway that split off. I stooped at the end of the hallway and looked left. Seems we were beaten to the job. She seemed confused. What do you mean dash? She was cut off. Exorcism. 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 And you. Exorcism, shouted the all too familiar voice of Aqua. We turned down the hall and saw Aqua surrounded by dolls that were either floating or on the floor. She was dressed in blue pajamas and didn't seem overwhelmed or anything, but I decided to help out. Radiant soul, I said as we got close. The aura washed over the remaining dolls and they hit the floor. Aqua seemed confused but eventually turned around and came face to face with me and Darkness. Hey, I had that. Why are you interfering in a goddess's job? I merely shrugged. I'd rather them be exorcised all at once, rather than one by one. She huffed and crossed her arms with a pout. Still a goddess's job, she mumbled out. We then heard a set of screams on the other side of the house. That must be Kazuma and Megumin. They don't have any defenses against the spirits. Aqua with a new sense of vigor pointed ahead. Let us go, my servants. We shall exorcise these spirits in the name of me. The two started running in the direction of the screams. I just walked. We didn't have to go very far, but the other two arrived before me since they were running. I turned down a hallway and saw them in the middle of it. They were in front of a bathroom door. Aqua was exorcising the dolls as Darkness was trying to hit them with a duster. And as expected, she was failing miserably. Just as the last doll fell, Aqua was about to sigh and wipe her forehead. But suddenly the bathroom door burst open and smashed her in the head as Kazuma burst out. All right. I'll take you on, you bastards. Dash. He stopped as he noticed Aqua on the floor. He looked around and saw me and Darkness standing nearby. Oh. Hey guys, he waved with a questioning voice. Aqua suddenly burst from the floor. What is wrong with you? I save you, and this is what I get. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were there, he shouted back. Is it safe? Mumbled a voice as Megumin stepped out from behind Kazuma. Yes, it's safe, I said aloud. I pushed out my senses to cover the whole house. I'm sure Aqua can say the same, but I think that's all the spirits. At least for now. How can you be sure? She asked. I personally have taken care of at least 70 spirits, and Aqua herself has probably done similar amounts. She puffed out her chest after I said that. Of course. Something this little of an issue is no problem for me. We more or less ignored her as Kazuma spoke. Well, we should probably clean these up and get some sleep so we can turn in the quest tomorrow. I snapped my fingers and the dolls all fell into one of my gate's portals. I'll collect the dolls and deposit them somewhere. I have no use for them personally. Once again, you're a lifesaver, Kazuma thanked me, saving us a hell of a lot of time. All in all, I'd like to think that last night's quest went pretty well for the most part. After mostly Aqua and I exorcised all the spirits, we called it a night and went to bed, with Kazuma and Aqua going to the guild at some point during the day to cash in the quest. Morning did eventually arrive, so I awoke at the crack of dawn, went from an odd dream to a dreamless sleep. I stood from the bed inside the mansion and had a good stretch, popping any stiff joints. Even though the bed was nice, I still liked to do it. I quickly flashed on an outfit before I left the room, which was just a tight white short-sleeved shirt with the loose black pants I slept in and a pair of black shoes. When I stepped into the hallway, it was quiet, guessing everyone is still asleep. Not many people get up as early as I do. With a slight shrug, I shut my door and continued towards the set of stairs that lead towards the main floor. I wonder what I should do until everyone wakes up. I thought as I reached the main floor. Haven't explored anywhere else, maybe I should check for a kitchen and make something to eat with my own hands. From what I could tell, it was closer to 7 in the morning, so it probably would be best to get something to eat. Plus I felt like cooking since for the past while I had been eating things not prepared by me. Not saying that the food I had at the Toketsu's was bad, but while I was on the road back to Axel, I didn't make much myself and just had my gate make food. With that, I started my search for the kitchen. I walked around the main floor for around half an hour before I actually found something. One of the rooms I walked into was the dining room, and it was fairly large and looked like a typical fancy dining room you'd expect in a manor or mansion. There was a table up in the rec room we found before, so they'd probably use that more than this room since it's probably a little too big for only 4 people. We hadn't cleaned this room, so I wasn't gonna use it or clean it. There was a set of double doors that led to another room which I assumed was the door to the kitchen. I pushed open the doors and I was not wrong with that thought. The kitchen was large and just like the rest of the house, it was made of mostly stone. Wooden cabinets lined the walls which could only be holding large quantities of plates and cutlery. A large island was in the middle of the room as well. Pots and pans were hanging from the racks, even a few spices. While some of them would have to be thrown out, they mostly still seemed usable. A wood-burning stove was placed in between the cabinets, and there was also an oven of sorts opposite of it built into a wall. It was probably one of the more nice kitchens I had seen in my past and current life. Doubt any of the food that's stored around isn't in the best shape. Good thing I keep plenty of food and ingredients stored on me for such an occasion. I made my way in front of the stove and inspected it. While it was a little dirty, which could be fixed easily, it still seemed to be in working condition and even had some wood in it. I haven't had French toast or anything since I came to this world, and I haven't seen it anywhere here, so maybe I can make it myself. I'm not sure if syrup has been introduced to this world yet, and its most basic components are sugar, water, and some kind of juice or nectar. Could even use corn starch, and my gate could easily do that for me since I personally don't know how to make it. Could even make a profit out of it, if it hasn't been mass-produced already. From what I remember, it wasn't mass-produced until maybe the 1800s but was discovered before then, and this world wasn't, and kind of was around that level at the same time. I shrugged my shoulders and got to work before I lost myself in Canadian history. I didn't want to use any of the pots, pans or plates, so I cleaned up the oven and some space on the island that was across from the stove. I procured a mixing bowl and some ingredients, which were an egg, vanilla and cinnamon. I mixed the ingredients and had my gate give me some bread while I lit the wood in the stove with a simple use of the tinder spell. I greased up a pan and placed it on the stove to heat up while I coated some bread that I sliced in the mixture of egg, vanilla and cinnamon. Good thing cinnamon is a thing here, or that would have sucked. I chuckled to myself as I placed the first few coated slices of bread onto the pan. It immediately made a satisfying sizzle and almost immediately filled the room with the scent of cinnamon. Lord knows I've missed this smell, I reminisced while keeping an eye out on the bread so it didn't burn. I flipped the toast as it got sufficiently toasted on one side, and I stood there for a moment to appreciate how damn good of a flip that was. Within 20 or so minutes, I already almost had enough to serve everyone. I was just putting another few slices in the pan, when I felt a pair of eyes on me. Turning around, I saw a familiar pair of red eyes staring at me from the kitchen doorway. Something you need? Megumin jumped a little but quickly snapped out of her stupor. What is that? She asked with curiosity as her tired gaze looked hungrily at the stack of food on the counter. French toast, I replied while flipping the bread. What's a French? She asked with a head tilt. I chuckled at that. Nothing to concern yourself with. I then had an idea. You're a child, right? She pouted at that. I'll take that as a yes. Anyways, I want you to try something for me. A gate opened in front of her and she barely managed to catch a small vial filled with a thick brown liquid. She suspiciously looked at it. You're not trying to poison me, are you? I laughed a little before I responded, nothing like that. It's called syrup. Think of it like a sweeter, less healthy version of honey that I will be serving with this. I gestured to the pan. She cautiously sniffed it and didn't see anything wrong with it, so she took a cautious sip from it and she immediately brightened up before trying to down the small vial, which took a bit since it was thick and the vial was small. It's amazing, she shouted. Of course it is, I said rather smugly. Now run along and wake the rest up and bring them to the rec room. The syrup was a success. Now I just needed to finish this up and store it to keep warm while I bring it up to the rec room. It's certainly a good thing that icing sugar exists in this world as well. Can't have it without icing sugar. With a few casual flicks, I put the rest of the toast onto the large stack I had beside me, and without a glance I stored it in my gate and left the kitchen. I made my way back to the main hall and ascended the stairs to the second floor. Within minutes I had ascended the stairs to the second floor and made it to the door of the rec room. With a simple push, I opened the door and was greeted to the sight of the gang, all rounded up by the table. Everyone was still in their sleepwear and were currently waiting at the table expectantly, Kazuma sitting on one end of the table next to Megumin and across from a very tired-looking Aqua. Kazuma was the first to notice my appearance. He gave a short yawn before addressing me. Yo man, he said with a slight wave. Megumin was telling us you made something? I nodded. I have made French toast, I said rather smugly. Kazuma's face brightened up. Whoa, really? I haven't had that stuff in forever. I thought I could faintly smell something familiar. Darkness seemed curious. You've had this before? I've never heard of it, she said from next to Aqua. Kazuma nodded. Yeah, that stuff wasn't ultra popular from where I came from specifically, but I'm stoked, he finished joyfully. Did you and Gil come from the same country? Megumin asked curiously. Something like that, I said while taking a seat at one of the heads of the table. Darkness was to my left and Megumin was to my right. Now, I waved my hand and a golden portal opened in front of all of us. Slowly plates started to materialize with cutlery and the food on the plates. Now place this on top. Small pitchers of syrup then appeared in front of everyone. Megumin and Kazuma immediately started pouring theirs on, while Aqua and Darkness did it a little more slowly. I did my own at my own pace and watched everyone take their first bites. They immediately froze after their bites. Well? I asked while looking somewhat lazily at them. They seemed to shake themselves out of a stupor and started tearing into the food. I will take that as it's good, I mostly mumbled to myself with a small smile as I dug into my own. When breakfast was over, I dismissed all the plates and accepted the praise on how good it was. Kazuma even asked if I'd like to live here and cook for them, but I declined that almost immediately. Once all the food had settled, Kazuma and Aqua went to get ready so they could go cash in the quest in order to get the reward. Not having anything better to do, I decided to go with them and possibly see if there was any good quests today, maybe even get Kazuma's party to come along. I was dressed in my usual leather jacket outfit as we entered the guild and walked up to Luna at the counter. She noticed our approach and gave us a wave. "Good morning you three," she said with a smile. "Anything I can help you with?" Kazuma nodded. "Yeah, we're here to turn in a quest." He pulled out some sheet of paper. "We cleared out that manor of spirits last night." Luna then gained a surprised look. "Oh. We have a special reward for that 1 inch." She then pulled out a tray that had a decent amount of errors on it. The guild was at its wit's end trying to get that solved, since all the spirits would be exorcised and more would show up. Kazuma and Aqua high-fived and started doing a mini celebration. "Why was that place so special?" I asked Luna. "Well, it wasn't the house itself," she started, "but someone erected a barrier around the nearby cemetery and all the ghosts flocked to that house since it was empty." Kazuma and Aqua immediately went pale as they just looked at each other. "Would you give us a sec?" Kazuma asked Luna as he slowly walked away with Aqua as he pushed her. Luna just kind of sat there as she stared at Kazuma, looking at Aqua with a mean look. She then looked to me. "Do you know what that's about?" I shrugged and put my hands in my pockets. "I have a few guesses." As the two were talking to each other, Luna seemed to realize something. "I forgot to tell you something." She then bent down to grab something. She came up a moment later with a guild request form. "I know you just got back from a request, but you got a specific request again." This was interesting for sure. "Oh really? By whom?" She scratched her cheek slightly. "Well, it's kind of from the royal capital." I arched an eyebrow. "What would they want with me?" "Well, do you know who Mitsurugi is?" she asked me. I nodded. "Kid with the powerful sword." She nodded. "Apparently his sword was stolen and sold, so he's been working to reacquire it, and he regularly helped fighting on the front lines against the Demon King. And since his sword is a large portion of his power, he can't properly fight. I mean, he's strong on his own, but he can't fight on the front lines right now, and the borders have been getting more difficult to defend. And they need me." "Who needs you?" Kazuma walked back to us with a defeated Aqua in tow. "Apparently the royal capital needs my assistance in defending against the Demon King's army since Mitsurugi doesn't have his sword," I responded. Kazuma flinched then spoke again. "So, you gonna do it?" I shrugged, and then looked back to Luna. "What kind of reward are they offering?" "It's up in the air, but they are offering a base of 2 million Eris, and depending on how well you do or how much you do, the reward can increase." 2 million, shouted Kazuma as he slammed his hands on Luna's desk, startling her a bit. "Please tell me he can bring people." Luna nervously responded. They requested him specifically, so I'm not too sure." Kazuma then slumped forward. "Why does the world hate me?" "Well, there's still your reward." She pushed the tray from earlier a bit further. Kazuma then looked even more deflated. "I can't. Not in good conscience." "All right then," she responded rather slowly as she put the tray aside before looking at me again. "Well, where exactly would I need to be and when?" "You'd first have to go to the capital, which is on the way towards the border between the Kingdom of Belzerk and the Demon King's territory." "I can't just go right to the border." "I don't know too much, but supposedly a garrison of troops are going to be leaving the capital to assist, and they'd want you to go with them and meet the garrison leader who will be taking over." I closed my eyes in thought. The royal capital, huh? While I don't care that much about royalty, it probably would be a good idea to either integrate myself or at least gain good relations. It would definitely be beneficial and plus. I outwardly smirked. It'll be a good way to test my skills on an army. I opened my eyes and addressed Luna. "I'll go assist them." Luna let out a sigh. "Thank you." She then handed me a few sheets of paper. "This is a rough overview of the details and when you should be expected." I took the papers and nodded. "I guess I'll leave as soon as I can." I looked back to Kazuma, who still seemed deflated. "I'll go back to the mansion with you and relax a bit before I leave, also give a proper goodbye since I'll probably be gone for a while." Kazuma straightened up a little. "Yeah, let's go." He then slowly walked towards the door with Aqua. I followed behind the two, and once we reached the outside, Kazuma groaned into his hands. "What's the point of having a high luck stat if it sucks?" I patted him on the shoulder as an idea struck me. "You know." I started. "They requested me specifically." "Sure." I handed Kazuma the paper. "Doesn't say anything about me bringing a party or assistance now, does it?" Aqua then peeked over Kazuma's shoulder. "You're right. It just says they need your help, not to come alone." Something clicked in Kazuma's head as he whipped his head to look at me with some sort of pleading eyes. "You'll take us?" His face was certainly humorous. "Sure," I shrugged. "If they have a problem with it, they can take it up with me directly." "All right." Kazuma pumped his fist in the air. "Let's go get ready and get a move on." As lazy as Kazuma was, at least from what I've seen and how he handles quests, I was surprised at how pumped up he was for this. It was more than likely for the money since he still didn't really have any, and with how much debt he's in, a large sum of money split between us would still be a lot for him. When Kazuma, Aqua and I agreed to head back to the manor, I split off from them and went to prepare a means of transport. Just went to the local business that rented out carriages and rented one to take with us. I had some slight experience with carriage driving, so I was gonna be the driver for the most part. With an hour or so passing, I arrived back at the manor with a small one-horse carriage that could comfortably hold all of us and whatever baggage the party had, which I could store if needed. It had cushioned seats on the inside and on the driver's seats, as well as a standard cover to protect the passengers against rain and/or wind. "Easy now," I said while giving a slight tug on the reins to stop the horse. I pulled the brake to lock the wheels and hopped off the carriage. Within less than a minute I was already inside the main entrance of the manor. I certainly didn't have to wait long, as I could already see and hear everyone coming. I can't believe we're heading to the front lines. I heard Darkness as she came from around a corner at the top of the stairs along with everyone else who were all carrying bags. Just the thought of facing hordes of demons has got me excited. Kazuma responded as they started descending the stairs, "You have a different definition of exciting, Miss Freak." "I am most certainly not a freak," she shouted back. Kazuma completely ignored her and turned his attention to me. "Yo," he started with a small wave, "saw you coming from the rec room and we're all ready to go." "Good," I nodded. "It's going to take a while before we get to the royal capital and a little longer until we reach the kingdom's borders. But once we finish our quest, I can immediately teleport us back." "You think you'll have enough magic to get us all back in one go?" Kazuma asked. "Including the carriage, I should have more than enough." "At least we don't have to sit through a whole ride back," said Aqua. I then turned my back to them. "I only rented a somewhat smaller carriage, so if it gets too crowded then I can store your belongings until you need them." We then all climbed into the carriage and set off on our journey to the royal capital. We didn't encounter anything on our way to the capital. No real troubles occurred other than Aqua doing the classic "Are we there yet?" every goddamn hour. It was quickly silenced after the 15th or so time by me taking her bottles of alcohol that she brought with her and storing them in my gate. It didn't work the best, but when I threatened to destroy them and not give her a share of the reward, it seemed to do the trick. Did also have to deal with Megumin wanting to release herself by casting an explosion spell every day, but that was Kazuma's problem to deal with during the few breaks we had during the time we traveled. We took 4 or so breaks a day to let the horse rest and stretch our legs for a bit before continuing. At night I supplied some tents and prepared the meals, mostly just stews and such since they were simple and didn't need too much attention. Darkness didn't really give any trouble since we didn't encounter any world-ending monsters, so she was pretty docile. Other than a few comments that triggered her other side, managed to do something, but I was used to it, and Kazuma seemed slightly fed up with all 3 of them at some times, but then again, that was a him problem. It took nearly 2 to 3 weeks just to get to the capital, which wasn't the worst, but it had so far been the longest distance I had traveled just by carriage alone. Upon reaching the city gates, it was just a matter of showing the request form and my adventurer card along with everyone else's to get in. We were quickly approved and told to head directly to the castle where we would meet up with the garrison leader who would be setting out with his troops in a few hours. So I did just that and proceeded to drive us towards the castle, and it certainly was a very prestigious castle with its many towers and other features that made it stand out. "Whoa, that place is huge," Aqua said aloud as she poked her head beside me through the opening in the carriage. "The kind of place someone like me should be living in." "I wouldn't mind living in such a fancy place either," Megumin spoke with Kazuma agreeing. "As nice as it is," I spoke, "the amount of space that isn't needed and the fact that it is just too big." "Come on man, you're saying you wouldn't want to be a king and own a sweet castle like that?" "I certainly wouldn't mind," I responded with a small smirk. "Commanding and leading seems like fun, but until more experience is gained, then it would be useless." "Yeah, I guess that would be tough, but man, I would love to just kick back on a fancy chair all day and do mostly what I want," Kazuma spoke with a distant look in his eye. "That's because you're a NEET," Aqua spoke. "I am not." "R2. I am not." "R2. Enough." I raised my voice to quiet them down. "Don't make me look like a fool for bringing you 2 on this quest." "Yes sir," they both said dejectedly. "Good," I said with a nod as I looked back into the carriage as they sat down. I glanced at Darkness, who seemed oddly quiet. "You're oddly quiet." Oh, yeah. The castle is very nice." I just hummed at the odd response. "She's definitely hiding something, maybe she's been here before. I won't bother for now." With that thought over, we had made it to the front of the castle where a few guards and a woman who was wearing a full white suit with gold trimming, a blue necktie and a sword strapped to her waist. She had short blonde hair with a single braid on the right side of her head and swept bangs that covered her right eye. Darkness upon seeing her immediately leaned back as to not show her face to this woman. Now that is something I will have to ask her about. When I stopped the carriage in front of them, the woman looked up to meet my eyes. Greetings, she spoke evenly, I am Claire of the Shinfornia house. I will not be the one accompanying you to the border, but I have been instructed to meet with you. I could just barely hear Darkness sigh at the part where she would not be joining us. I would assume that you are the adventurer that they call Gilgamesh. I nodded. I am. I come in response to the request for my aid. She looked me up and down, then back to the carriage that had everyone's head but Darkness poking out. And who are these people you have brought with you? She asked rather sternly. The group flinched a little under her gaze, but I did not. I brought a few people with me to assist me. She scanned the people that she could see, and after a moment she looked back to me. You do realize that she pointed directly at me, you were requested, not these people. I narrowed my eyes a little. The request did not state that I could not bring a party, just that I have been requested. She also narrowed her eyes but soon relaxed her posture a bit more. Alright then, she motioned to the two guards beside her. These two will take you to the garrison leader. I must return to the princess, she said with a tone of finality as she walked away towards the castle without another word. I huffed a little when she was out of earshot. A pleasant one, isn't she? Kazuma responded, kind of scary, but she was pretty hot, not gonna lie. I more or less just hummed as we disembarked and approached the two guards, Darkness staying at the back of the group and trying to keep out of sight. One of the guards spoke. We will have someone take the carriage and any of your belongings that you need to leave here to the stables just over there. The guard pointed towards the stables that were nearby. If you would follow us, we will take you to the barracks. The guard walked off after that. We walked for only a few minutes, but something was certainly off. Darkness kept walking behind me or beside me, and it seemed she was trying to stay out of view of certain people. She certainly isn't the type of person to shy away from the gazes of strangers. As soon as I can, I will have a word with her. After that, we arrived in front of a somewhat large stone building that was close to the castle. It wasn't an overly large building, but it was still large, as a barracks should be. Two guards were standing up front while there were soldiers not too far away training. The guard that was leading us nodded to the two at the front and led us inside. The guard turned to us and spoke, wait here for a moment while I get the garrison leader. He then walked off down a hallway. The area we found ourselves in was what you'd expect for a waiting room of sorts. There were a few benches that lined the walls and a few soldiers walking around. Some were in gear on patrols, while others were in a more casual outfit and lounging around, probably their day off. Kazuma, Aqua and Megumin took a seat on a bench, but Aqua didn't seem to want to wait. Kazuma, can't we just go and take these stupid demons on? I can easily take them down on my own. Kazuma then started to retort her, but before I could hear anything more, I tapped Darkness on the shoulder as she was kind of spacing out a bit. She jumped a little and looked at me. I motioned my head behind me where there was an empty hall not being guarded at the moment. I didn't wait for a response and just walked over. She followed behind, but at a slower pace. I leaned on the entryway frame of the hall and looked at her as she stood opposite of me. I crossed my arms and addressed her. What are you doing? She looked around for a second in some form of embarrassment. It was a little hard to tell. What do you mean? I rubbed the bridge of my nose with my right hand before I spoke to her again. You've been trying to stay out of sight from people and are cowering behind me. She flinched a little at the cowering part. You relish being stared at by strangers. I do not. I simply deadpanned at her response. Okay, maybe sometimes. Exactly, so what is going on? She contemplated speaking for a moment. I've just been here before. I raised an eyebrow. What, did you go on an exhibitionist streak and get kicked out? She immediately went red. Absolutely not. Then what is it? She stuttered for a moment before she spoke again. There are just a few people I don't want seeing me. She didn't seem to want to tell me the exact reason. I let out a sigh and raised my right hand slightly and opened up a gate. A necklace dropped into my hand as I held it out to her. She seemed confused, so I elaborated. It's a pendant I got from a peddler on one of my travels. It alters the general appearance of a person to specific people. If being seen is that much of a problem, then just wear this for now. I and the rest of the party will see you normally, but any strangers you don't want to see you will see something else. It's either this or I can take you back home, because I'm not gonna be shielding you from sight this whole time. She took the necklace and placed it around her neck. It was a simple gold-plated chain necklace with a green gem in the middle. It glowed for a moment before dimming back down. Her outward appearance didn't change, but that was to be expected. She gave her thanks before we went back to wait with everyone else, but we didn't have to wait long. A man who had 3 guards with him rounded the corner. He wore a polished set of bright steel armor that was leagues higher in quality compared to any of the guards or soldiers. He had a full plate helmet tucked under his arm so his face could be seen. He was on the older side since his hair and average beard were all gray. His face was stern and fairly slim that had a pair of gold-colored eyes that seemed to stare into the soul. The man was also tall, very tall. He was at least 6'5", maybe a little taller due to his armor. He gave us a small smile as we came in view. "Ah, so you must be the great Gilgamesh I've heard so much about." He approached as we all stood to greet him. "I am Eric Gorm, a knight in service of the king who will be leading this operation." He extended a hand. I took his hand and tilted my head a bit to look at him directly. "A pleasure." I let go of his hand. "When will we depart?" "My men are just finishing up preparations to leave within the hour," he responded and looked to Kazuma and his party. "And who might you all be?" he asked with a kind smile. Kazuma was up first. "I'm Kazuma," he said, relatively respectful with a small wave. Megumin was up next. "I am the Crimson Demon and the world's most ultimate explosion mage, Megumin." She struck a pose in attempt to impress the knight, which he chuckled to in response. Almost the way a parent would to a child trying to show off. Aqua, not wanting to be outdone, was up next. "I am the goddess, Archpriest Aqua." Eric raised a slight eyebrow and glanced at me. I shrugged my shoulders and spoke lowly. "A little crazy this one, but powerful in her own right." Eric only nodded in response. Darkness was last. "I am Darkness, the Crusader." Eric nodded to them all. "Let us hope that you all survive this battle and bring honor to the kingdom." Right after our introductions, a soldier came up to Eric and told him that everything was prepared and everyone would be ready to move out when he gave the order. "Gather everyone and we will set out immediately." "Yes, sir," the soldier responded before jogging off. Eric then looked to me. "I can understand why only one of your members are wearing armor. Where is your armor?" I smirked lightly as a golden glow encompassed me. When the light died down, I was in my armor with my hair now defying gravity. Eric seemed rather impressed. "I see. A magnificent set of armor." I only chuckled in response. "Now let us depart." He flipped his helmet and placed it on, completely covering his face. The battle would soon begin. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.